Okay guys, so I usually don't get sucked into the big cake trends, and this is certainly a big cake trend, the jelly cake. But I was having a little bit of FOMO and wanted to give it a shot. I hadn't seen an icy version done yet, so I thought I'd mix it up a bit. Do I think the jelly cake's here to stay like the naked cake and the drip cake? No. Was it good fun and do they look great? Yes. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial of my version of the jelly cake. So this right here is the main board for the cake, which is a 12mm thick MDF board that I've cut to a 7-inch round and then covered with some aluminium foil tape to make sure it's food safe. I'll go ahead and cover it with some white chocolate ganache that I texture slightly with my spatula. I then came in and put some ivory ganache on top. I wish I'd made it a bit more browny, yellowy sort of coloured, but hey, these things happen. I textured that also and popped that board aside. For the actual cake, I'm using a 6-inch round vanilla cake that is 3 inches high, cut into 1-inch layers and layered with white chocolate ganache. I just stacked that up on top of each other, and then I went ahead and started carving out sort of a semicircle concave number. There was no real rhyme or reason, I just went for it. In hindsight, I definitely would have used a 7-inch wide cake simply because I would have wanted it to touch the sides of the board, but these things happen and I just used what I had. Save those cake scraps and pop them in a bowl because we're gonna need them to make some cake clay. Add a bit of ganache and mush it all up into a beautiful modelling consistency. Now I'm popping the cake on another board to set this up, and make sure you don't secure the cake to the board with any chocolate ganache or anything because we have to move it. Using the cake clay, I then went ahead and started building up the iceberg. Once I was happy with the shape, I then came in with some white chocolate ganache that I had also tinted white to make it extra white and gave it a really good crumb coat, making sure you get every single part of the cake. And once I'd finished that coat, I popped it aside to chill and brought it back and gave it a second ganache coat. Now the great thing about these cakes is you don't have to make sure this part is perfect. It can be textured and rough. Make sure, however, that every single part of the cake is covered. We don't want jelly leaching into the cake because that's going to spell disaster. Now I'm moving that cake back onto the main board and attaching it with some white chocolate ganache. As you can see, it doesn't come right to the edges. That's what I was saying before. I would have liked to have used a 7-inch, but never mind. I'm using some more cake clay to build up the iceberg, and making sure that I build up some areas on the actual board so there's room to secure our figures later. Once again, I go in over all of that cake with some white chocolate ganache, making sure it is completely covered. As you can see, even the sides of the board got covered. Okay, once I was happy with the shape of my iceberg, I whipped out my little mini figurines that you may have seen me make a couple of videos ago. I'll pop a link in the iCard above if you want to go and check out how I made them, and started placing them around the cave area of the icicle using toothpicks to secure them. Now prior to putting them on, I made sure that I coated them in some edible glaze just to stop the colours from leaching. It worked pretty well. Now, as you can see, I now have my cake board on a setup board, which you're going to have to do. And I've taken some acetate or a cake collar, and I'm wrapping the entire main cake board with that cake collar. What I found was there was a little bit of excess chocolate on the sides of that cake board, and the collar wasn't fitting securely, and we need it to fit nice and snug. So I just cleaned up that chocolate, placed my acetate collar around that board, and secured it with some sticky tape. Then I took some white chocolate ganache in a piping bag and just made a seal around the edge of that acetate. Once that was all sealed in, I've taken an adjustable cake ring. You can use a springform tin pan so long as it fits your main cake board. And I made sure that I secured it nice and snugly against the main cake board. I then took some more chocolate ganache and placed a seal around the base of my cake ring. I'm using my finger here to make sure I've got in every single nook and cranny. I don't want leakage. I even took some extra ganache and made a bit more of a seal on the inside. I don't think it needed it, and in hindsight, I sort of wish I hadn't done it because it looks a little bit messy once you're done, but learn from my mistakes. Okay, it's time to make the jelly. So I've got 5 cups of cold water here, 400 grams of white sugar, 120 grams of gelatin, and I place that all in the pot. Just mix it all up and let it sit for about 5 minutes so the gelatin has some time to bloom. It's thick, it's gluggy, and you don't think it's gonna clear up, but it does. Don't panic. Now we want to start cooking the gelatin. So I've got this on a medium-high setting and I pretty much stir it consistently. And you want to make sure that you don't send it to a boil. Boiling the gelatin will break the bonds and the gelatin won't be quite as strong. So make sure it doesn't boil, it just gets nice and warm. And that your sugar is nice and dissolved. I've also added a couple of drops of some airbrush color in a blue. And then you can add 1 to 2 teaspoons, or 3 or 4, whatever you prefer, of flavoring of your choice. Set it aside to cool a little and then skim off any of the foam that's left on the top. Now be patient here, you want to cool your gelatin until it's, well, around about room temperature. And make sure that you have been chilling your cake, in the freezer preferably, for a good half an hour. I poured a little bit of the gelatin over the top just to make sure we had no leaks. Then I went ahead and started pouring the rest in. It is terrifying, but satisfying when you get no leaks. And that, my friends, was that. Pop it in the fridge and let it sit overnight. Be patient. And I say that as I'm unmolding in my pajamas the next morning because I have the patience of a 2-year-old. So I just scraped off that chocolate ganache from the outside, which was our seal, and I opened up my cake ring, lifted it off and hoped for the best. So far so good. And then it was time for the reveal. Off comes the acetate. Ta-da! I have success, yes! I love when a plan comes together. So pretty. Now, this gelatin was pretty clear, but if you want a more clear result, you can buy a higher grade gelatin. I just use gelatin from the supermarket, but the high grade gelatin does have a bit of a higher price tag. I'll put a link in the description below where you can find a higher grade gelatin. I then went ahead and used some cling wrap to cover the entire jelly section of the cake. And what I have here are some rice paper sheets that I'm cutting up into small rectangles. We're gonna make some snow. I put those small rectangles of rice paper into a coffee grinder. Yep, coffee grinder. And I grind her up. Shake, 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 shake. I also made some blue colored snow by coloring my rice paper sheets with an edible printer prior to cutting them up and grinding them. I then went ahead and covered the iceberg in some piping gel and started adding the edible snow. There's the blue stuff, just little bits of sprinkles for extra dimension. It's a messy job, but the effect's pretty cool. I use my steamer to steam that on. Be careful, you are working with cold chocolate and cold jelly, and steam is hot, so from a distance. It just helps secure it a little bit better. A little bit of edible glitter, that icy effect. And then slowly remove the plastic. I added some extra edible snow to the sides where I wish I'd added cake instead. And that part was done. I then just took some white gel color on a very fine brush and painted some white lines around the edges of the, what's the name of the thing again? iceberg. Iceberg to make it look like the waves are sort of crashing against it. Of course, I did it around the seal's head too. Cute. Then I went ahead and placed all my other little animals, just using a little bit of chocolate ganache to secure them. Any that don't cooperate, you can always pop a little bit of a toothpick or a bit of spaghetti in there to make sure that they stay right on their iceberg. Oh man, so cute. That's supposed to be me at the top. It looks nothing like me, but anyway. I ended up putting the finished cake on a 10-inch round board, added some extra snow, and voila, it was done. Is it just me, or is it cute? Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on my version of the jelly cake. There are a few learning curves myself and things I would have changed if I were to do it again. I would have used a larger cake. I probably wouldn't have done the ganache seal on the inside of the cake ring the way I did once I'd had it all together. And if I was making this for a client, I may have spent the extra coin on a higher grade gelatin. But besides that, I had a ball. And I hope you loved it too. If you did, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that you are informed every time I upload a new video. And let me know in the comments, have you tried this cake trend? How did it go? Was it a fail? Was it a win? And would you do it again? Well guys, it was so good seeing you again, and I hope to see you again really soon, right here. Until then, you know what to do. You know what to do. Go and get your cake on. See you guys.